Hello, and welcome to today's event, Advancing an Inclusive Transition to Renewable Energy. I'm Milan Verveer, and I direct the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. We're so pleased to be co-hosting this program with the permanent mission of the United Arab Emirates to the United Nations on the sideline of the UN Commission on the Status of Women's annual meeting. This year's CSW is calling for greater attention to the gender dimensions of the climate crisis. Access to renewable energy, as we all know, is critical to addressing climate change. Investing in women is one of the best ways to do this. Women are uniquely situated, yet underutilized as a critical force and certainly under-resourced. Not only does renewable energy enhance the well-being of women and their families, from improving education to providing entrepreneurship opportunities, but it is vital to addressing the climate crisis and reducing carbon emissions. Putting women at the forefront of the new clean energy technologies has never been more critical. An important focus, a central focus in November at COP26 was the need for greater investments in and efforts for access to renewable energy. Innovative models were shared and collective action was called for, but nowhere is it where it needs to be. That must change. And today we will hear from experts at the policy and grassroots levels who are doing cutting edge work, advancing an inclusive transition to renewable energy. Our institute, through research and programs, has been committed to elevating the role of women who are on the front lines of addressing climate change. They have much to offer policymakers. And in the next few weeks, we will be releasing a new study called Inclusive Climate Action: Why Women Are Key Actors in the Green Transition. And we're doing this in collaboration with the Better Way Foundation. Let me now turn to our opening speaker, Dr. Nawal Hosany, the permanent representative of the UAE to the International Renewable Energy Agency, and a very strong advocate for the role of women in addressing climate change challenges and advancing sustainability. Earlier, she served as the Deputy Director General of the Emirates Diplomatic Academy, the Executive Director of Sustainability at Masdar, Abu Dhabi's renewable energy company, and the Director of the Zayed Future Energy Prize, the UAE's global award for renewable energy and sustainability. She also launched and directed the UAE-led Women in Sustainability, Environment, and Renewable Energy Initiative, and has been active on numerous climate and women's leadership platforms. I know firsthand of her commitment to these issues. And Dr. Hosany, we're so pleased to be able to welcome you to kick off this program today. The platform is yours.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good morning. It is an absolute honor to be with you here today. And I do look forward to hearing from everyone on the topic. For me, must stand at the top of the global human, social, and economic development agenda in this critical decade of action and actually beyond. $9 trillion a year, ladies and gentlemen. That's the amount of money we need to invest every year through to 2050 if we are to get the planet on track towards a sustainable future and oversee the global energy transition. That's roughly twice the size of the annual GDP of Germany. Yes, it is a big number, but with a large portion of this figure already budgeted and accounted for, it is not the daunting number it may appear to be when taken in isolation and without context. And if anyone still flinches at the cost of overseeing the energy transition, we have a bigger problem than the sizable finances, because there is no number, no value, no cost that can be put on protecting our home. If we allow the financial cost to stand in the way of ensuring the long-term security and prosperity of our planet, we will live to regret this moment forever. If this is still seen as an overwhelming hurdle, we must learn to overcome it. And now, if we don't invest this money now, there's nothing left for us to save. That's the stark and frightening reality we are facing. There is no point in sugarcoating it. And one aspect of this transition that is overlooked, perhaps overshadowed by the sheer number, is the word investment. Investing is not the same as losing money. When we invest, we expect a return. And what greater return could there possibly be than the return of our planet to a sustainable pathway? When we invest, ladies and gentlemen, we also expect opportunities. And the opportunities of the global energy transition is plentiful. According to 2021 research from IRENA and the International Labour Organization, we can expect a net gain of more than 18 million jobs by 2030. So despite fears that some jobs would be lost, IRENA and the ILO found that up to 25 million new jobs will be created by 2030, while up to 7 million could be lost during the energy transition and might require reskilling. And by 2050, IRENA predicts that 43 million people will be employed by the renewable energy sector. There are currently 12 million people employed in this sector. So along with this windfall of new jobs, accelerating energy transitions on a path to climate safety can grow the world's economy by 2.4% within the next decade alone. It can be more. And if we can embed gender equality into the core of the transition process, it will be more. As governments raise their ambitions to meet climate goals and reach net zero goals, we must do so equitably. To do this, women must have a seat at the table where the decisions about the long-term future of our planet are made. To do this, we must integrate more women into the fields and sectors that will fuel and shape the world in the years to come. And if we can do this, we can unlock the full potential of humanity and not just half of it. It is simple but overlooked fact that actually half of our global population, maybe more, are women. Why then do we continue to see women underrepresented in the sectors and industries that will define the post-energy transition world? This is particularly acute in the renewable energy sector. To date, women hold less than 1/3 of all jobs in the renewable energy sector. And the roles they hold tend to be in administrative positions. This situation is made all the more bizarre when we consider the undeniable evidence that is emerging across the world, which shows that when women have greater representation in organizations, businesses, and governments, those entities are more productive, more creative, and more equitable. If there was ever a situation that required a productive, creative, equitable outcome, it is the global energy transition. And this is the opportunity we have ahead of us, a chance to build a fairer, cleaner, more sustainable society where everyone has a seat at the table. And I don't think that any cost can be placed on the outcome that we don't just want, but we desperately need. The fact is, we have transitioned from one energy source to another before, but now we are faced with the same task. We must ask ourselves, what do we want the world to look like on the other side of this era and world-defining moment. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing everyone's thoughts on this critical topic of our time.
Well, thank you so very much for setting the context for the discussion that will now take place with our panel, for demonstrating the urgency of the moment, for why investments are critical, and for why we critically need to tap the underutilized talents and experiences of women in renewables. So thank you so much. We're going to move now to Gillian Caldwell, who is the Deputy Assistant Administrator for Climate and Energy and the Chief Climate Officer at USAID, where she directs USAID's portfolio on climate and energy. She previously served as the CEO of Global Witness, where she worked to break the links between natural resource exploitation, conflict, poverty, corruption, and human rights abuses. She was also the executive director of One Sky, the largest collaborative to stem global warming and promote renewable energy campaign in the United States. She has extensive experience consulting with NGOs around the world and is a leading global social entrepreneur. Gillian, we're so happy to have you with us. Let me begin by asking you about what USAID is doing to promote equitable access to renewable energy. How does USAID implement a gender lens? And is this work that is growing? Is it scaling? We're delighted to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Verveer and Dr. Al-Hosany, for those really powerful opening remarks. You stole quite a bit of my thunder there, but I'll think of something else to say. And the first thing I'll say is that USAID is very much in action when it comes to the climate crisis and gender equity. Now Administrator Samantha Power frequently refers to us as a climate agency. And what she means is that the climate crisis threatens to jeopardize or potentially, if we play our cards right, accelerate our progress towards a renewable energy future. All of our gains, whether it's education or health, are threatened currently by the climate crisis. And women, of course, women and girls really bear the brunt of climate impacts. They are facing much higher than average rates of risk in instances where there's extreme weather events. Women have been documented to be 5 times as likely as their male counterparts to die. That's of course because they are very much on the front lines and don't have the same resources that men have. So women are both more likely to find themselves in the crosshairs of the climate crisis, and the ones that are best situated to understand and advance the solutions. And even in cases where women and girls are not empowered formally to lead, they are leading, they are already leading, and they need additional support. So as Administrator Power has said, climate change is sexist, but our response must not be. We are just about to launch a very aggressive strategy to tackle the climate crisis. Our strategy, which will be released next month, will take us through 2030. And it's a really whole of agency, all hands on deck response with gender equity at its core. We want to reduce carbon emissions by 6 billion tons. That's the equivalent of all US emissions in a year, protect 100 million hectares of land, increase the adaptation and resilience of 500 million people around the world, catalyze $150 billion. And importantly, in our goals on systems change, we want to change the game in 40 countries around the world to increase the access of women and other marginalized communities like Indigenous people, for example, to access the levers of power and to influence the direction of the future. This is all very much in alignment with the US government national strategy on gender equity and equality. That's the first ever national strategy which elevates climate as one of its top 10 priority areas. So we are shaping our implementation for that national strategy released by President Biden and his team, and really look forward to close partnership with all the other federal agencies on that. We already heard about a lot of the statistics regarding the underrepresentation of women in environmental sectors. So I won't go into those again, but I'll talk instead just briefly about what we're doing about it at USAID. So one flagship program is called Engendering Industries. Very tricky to have gotten gender in there. And our focus is on showing gender equality interventions and their ability to produce real and meaningful change. So we work with 98 partners in 38 countries through intensive and accelerating programs, driving gender equality in male-dominated sectors, including the energy sector. Engendering Industries have already hired more than 2,400 women, promoted more than 2,500, and trained more than 37,000 women on technical and soft skills to advance their careers. Just by way of example, we helped the Rwanda Energy Group, which is an electric utility in Rwanda, establish an all-female team at its new hydropower plant to help meet that country's goal of generating 60% of its energy from renewable sources by 2030. Broadly speaking, there are lots of such examples. Another one on the other side of the world is in India, where renewable energy, of course, is the fastest growing energy source, and energy utilities, BPRL and Tata Power, are leveraging the country's growing body of female STEM students to train and hire more women in renewable energy. So, as government actors and as civil society actors, it's critical not just that we train and employ women in the clean energy jobs of the future, but also that we include women at all levels of decision making when it comes to climate change adaptation and natural resource management and disaster risk reduction, because they have a stake as half of the planet's population, but more importantly, because they understand the context from firsthand experience, and they will be best able to ensure that we customize the solutions and implement them at scale. So thank you all for being here and for your commitment to gender equality when it comes to the climate crisis. And we're very excited to have women as a central partner and central commitment at USAID in our work to tackle the problem. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Gillian, and also for giving us that little preview, and we will stay tuned of the ambitious climate program that USAID is about to launch. Before we turn to you later in the Q&A, let me just ask you how you engage with the private sector, because I'm sure you do that as well in your partnerships.
Yeah, absolutely. So especially when it comes to our goal to catalyze $150 billion, we are obviously going to be looking very, very squarely to the private sector. So we are forging a range of innovative instruments like GRIP, which will be the Green Recovery Investment Program, which we hope to launch this fall. And in that initiative, we're putting $250 million over 5 years with an aim to catalyze $250 billion in climate finance for mitigation and adaptation. And what we're thinking about there is providing the blended finance that the private sector needs in order to feel comfortable stepping into the investment space, especially the adaptation space, where the private sector comprises just 3% of total investments. So we are providing concessionary capital with our partners at the Development Finance Corporation. We're providing first loss guarantees and doing all we can to bring the private sector in. We're also creating the enabling environments in the 80 countries around the world where we have a presence to ensure that the laws and the systems in place are conducive to private investment. And finally, we are very partnered with the private sector when it comes to protecting critical carbon sinks in the Congo Basin, for example, and in the Amazon. We often work with private sector, especially the private sector actors who really want to reduce deforestation in their supply chains, because deforestation is a primary driver of climate change. So we have a range of innovative instruments and tools to support those actors as well.
Terrific. That's a great comprehensive answer to that. We'll get back to you on the Q&A. I'm going to turn now to Flora Newman, who is the lead program officer for gender and climate change under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, and the Paris Agreement. She serves as the gender focal point and the focal point for women for the UN Climate Change Secretariat, where she seeks to support the implementation of gender equality strategies, including the Lima Work Program on Gender. And earlier, she practiced law in the private sector in areas including climate change, sustainability, and energy. I want to ask Flora how the UNFCCC is working to advance a gender lens on renewables in global and national policies. I think we all know that implementation has been less than it needs to be, and what can be done to achieve a greater implementation of those goals. And then also how the UNFCCC can better integrate the expertise of women, particularly at the grassroots level in its work. So Flora, please.
Thank you to the government of the United Arab Emirates and Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security for the invitation to participate in this event today. My name is Flora Newman, and I lead the work on gender and climate change at the UN Climate Change Secretariat. So how is the UNFCCC working to advance a gender lens on renewables in global and national policies and practice, and what is needed to see through full implementation of these commitments? I would start with the fact that parties to the UNFCCC have adopted the enhanced Lima Work Program on Gender and its Gender Action Plan, which seeks to advance gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls in all their diversity through the development of gender responsive and transformative climate policy and action. Phasing out fossil fuels and transitioning to renewable energy is a key component of the overall just transition that is required for the world to meet the 1.5-degree goal that the Paris Agreement sets out. And the Gender Action Plan explicitly references the need for everyone to benefit from a just transition and decent jobs. And one of the 5 priority areas under the plan is focused on gender responsive implementation and means of implementation. Under this priority area, there are several activities that relate to strengthening the integration of gender in national climate planning. Plans such as nationally determined contributions, national adaptation plans, and importantly, from an energy and just transition perspective, long-term strategies for low carbon and climate resilience. This involves activities such as peer-to-peer learning and the sharing of experiences, strengthening capacities of countries and organisations to gather and apply gender disaggregated data, and raising awareness of the importance of community and women-led, including Indigenous women-led solutions. As nearly 90% of NDCs mention renewable energy as a #1 option, with energy efficiency the second most frequently mentioned option to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, covering multiple sectors, including industry, transport and buildings, NDCs are a particularly important policy tool for enhancing gender equality and, by more women participating in the sector, ensuring that countries have sufficient workforce to deliver the clean energy transition. One activity under the Gender Action Plan focuses on the deployment and gender responsive technological solutions to address climate change, including strengthening, protecting and preserving local, Indigenous and traditional knowledge and practices in different sectors, and fostering women's and girls' full participation and leadership in science, technology research and development. Renewable energy is technologies that fall within this focus area, not only the technology itself, but also deployment and delivery, from mobile technology to the decentralized energy collective solutions. As for ensuring full implementation, this is where the transparency aspects of the UNFCCC process play a crucial role, both specifically under the Letting It Work program, but also all countries will report on and be peer reviewed their climate plans through the global stocktake mechanism that will happen in a couple of years. So how can multilateral organisations better centre the expertise of women and grassroots organisations? Multilateral organisations need to be better at centering the expertise of women and grassroots organisations, and that starts with listening to them, both women and grassroots organisations. Under the UNFCCC, the Women and Gender constituency has an important role in elevating women's, non-binary, grassroots and LGBTIQ voices in the intergovernmental climate process. This includes in statements to plenary sessions, participating in some technical and policy-making bodies, either as experts or observers, producing policy papers and demands on specific agenda items, and more broadly. For example, they've had a long-held position on phasing out fossil fuels, including phasing out all subsidies to fossil fuels. Building the capacity of women negotiators and of all negotiators on what gender-responsive and transformative climate policy looks like. In other words, they work very hard and do a fantastic job to overcome the barriers of a system not designed to make it easy for their voices to be heard. But it doesn't end there, and I'm hopeful that as the window to prevent the most dire climate pathways closes, a door opens widely for the ideas, perspectives and needs of those who have contributed the least to the problem, but have much to contribute to the solutions. Thank you.
We're very grateful to you, Flora, for laying out the goals of the UNFCCC in terms of the need to integrate gender more fully into the policy making world. And it's clear that there are many very important goals that are yet to be realized. So I think both accountability and greater implementation is a call to all of us because it is so critically important. Flora mentioned the need to listen to the grassroots. So we're going to turn now from the policymakers, from Gillian and Fleur, to the grassroots. And we're first going to go to Ahmedabad, India, to Reena Nanavati, who is the head of the Self-Employed Women's Association of India, the single largest union of informal workers in the country. She has been leading SEWA's pioneering work on renewable energy, work that is advancing women's access to markets, economic resilience, and livelihoods, particularly for rural women. SEWA, under Reema's leadership, has focused on women's economic empowerment by building women-owned businesses and women-led supply chains, and they have been very pioneering in this effort. She has spearheaded other efforts to rebuild lives and livelihoods for the earthquake-affected rural women, led rehabilitation programs in crisis-torn Afghanistan and Sri Lanka, as well as solutions to the millions of livelihoods that were impacted by the pandemic. It is no surprise that the government of India has awarded her its 4th highest civilian award. So Reema, before I go into some questions for you, we're going to show this video that gives us a little better understanding of some of the work of SEWA. Sure, thank you.
મારું નામ સરોજબેન છે. મારો ભૂતકાળ બહુ જ કપરો હતો. હું સવારે મજૂરીએ જતી હતી અને સાંજે ઘરે આવીને ચૂલા પર ધુમાડામાં ઘરની રસોઈ બનાવતી હતી. પણ મનમાં તો એવું હતું જ કે સારું જીવન જોઈએ છે અને મારે જ લાવવું પડશે. એ તો મારા બચત મંડળનો આભાર કે મને પ્રોત્સાહન આપ્યું અને એમણે એલપીજી વસાવવા મને ધિરાણ આપ્યું અને હું એલપીજી લઈ આવી. આજે મારા એકલા ઘરે ચોખ્ખું રસોડું નથી, મારા જેવી 1500 બહેનોને ચોખ્ખા રસોડાની તક આપી. મારી ધગસ વધી, મેં મારા ખેતરમાં સોલર પંપ નખાયો, એમાંથી મારા જેવા હજારો નાના ખેડૂત બહેનોને પાણી પહોંચાડ્યું. બીજા અમારી હું ના જોઈએ તો શું, પણ સૂરજ ને ધરતી તો અમારી સામે જોવાના જ છે. હું ત્યાંય ના રોકાય, મેં ઘરે ઘરે અજવાળા પહોંચાડ્યા. ફાગડી ગામમાં જ્યાં 100 વર્ષથી લાઇટ જ નહોતી, ત્યાં આજે રાતે પણ અજવાળા છે. જો સેવા અને સૂરજનો સહકાર ના હોત તો હું ખેતરે મજૂરી કરતી હોત અને મારા જેવી હજારો બહેનો અને ગામડાઓ અંધકારમય જીવન જીવતા હોત. સંગઠિત હતા, મંડળો હતા, તો આજે અજવાળા થયા. હજુ તો ભવિષ્ય અજવાળવાનું છે. નમસ્તે.
Well, Rima, I have been privileged to see firsthand the work of Sewa on several occasions, and I wonder if you could tell our audience about Sewa's approach and some of your most impactful initiatives in this area of renewable energy, green technology.
Namaste, and thank you so much, Ambassador Milan and also Ambassador Nawal Al-Hosany, for bringing me to this very important session and giving an opportunity to present the energy action as well as climate action taken by the poor grassroots women workers from the informal sector, the members of SEWA. Including their innovative business models and integrated approach to building their green entrepreneurship. Today, I speak here on behalf of 2.1 million self-employed women workers from the informal economy. And from our experience working with these women workers for almost 5 decades, we've learned that while world over, the issues of women, work, energy, climate, water, and livelihood are treated different and addressed in silos. When it comes to the poor women workers from the informal economy, it is all connected. And therefore, it needs a very holistic and an integrated approach. As we saw from Saroj Ben's own experience, of having access to energy helped her fight poverty, but also build her own energy enterprise, and how incorporating gender component in the energy supply chain and using small-scale renewable energy applications can strengthen the livelihoods of these women workers. So what does it entail to transform poor rural women workers to successful energy entrepreneurs, or build a business model, and what it takes to build a business model? What kind of business model is required, and how do we scale it up? These are some of the areas that we have been focusing and working on as of now. To answer these questions, I think the fundamental is organizing. As Saroj Ben also said, that she was able to do this just because she was organized. And it builds the collective strength of these women workers. It builds their confidence that she can also use this technology and makes it accessible, and also, encourages her to take technical trainings. It helps in building their bargaining power. Let me give another example of the poorest of the poor, salt pan workers in the deserts of Gujarat. These salt pan workers even live today in this 21st century as bonded laborers. They live in very hostile climatic conditions of temperatures ranging from 2 degrees to 50 degrees centigrade, barely earning $150 annually. So you can imagine their earning, on which they have to sustain their families of 6 to 8 members for the entire year. All this due to lack of asset ownership and access to working capital. Over the 5 years, SEWA had realized that, providing affordable access to green energy solutions could lift these salt pan workers out of poverty. And today we have not 1 or 2, but 7,000 women salt pan workers, all taking credit from the public sector banks and using solar pump sets. This has not only led to an increase in their income by almost 200%, but also an aggregated reduction of over 21,000 tons of carbon emission per year. And now these very women are using their solar panels in the off season to setting up a 2.7 megawatt solar park or a microgrid, and selling the energy to the grid. So solar pump sets, mini grids, clean cooking devices, cook stoves, energy entrepreneurs like Saroj Ben organizing women workers into their own green enterprises. And then these enterprises apply commercial strategies to facilitate improvements in both financial, social, and most importantly, environmental aspects of the women, their communities, and livelihoods. To enable these women, we are also now collaborating with UNEP to build a cadre of 15,000 women solar engineers so that they can do the operation and maintenance. Therefore, I think we strongly believe that adopting a bottom-up approach and promoting green employment opportunities will not only lead to environment and climate action, but contribute to countries' NDCs. But what kind of skills are needed? What kind of certification? And how do you scale up these green enterprises? And what is really needed is green financing. Women should have affordable access to finance. And I was very happy when Gillian was talking about blended financing. And I hope that someday these grassroots women also have access to green financing. Lastly, I would like to say that energy transition should be driven by energy users, especially small and medium businesses, formal and informal workers. Energy transition must be just and inclusive, just to the poor women and inclusive to the working women. Thank you so much, Milan, for giving me and the SEWA women this opportunity.
Rima, listening to you, first of all, thank you for talking about green financing, because that is one of the big areas where the gap needs to be closed, the finance area, but also for those concrete examples. And as I was listening to you, I was thinking of the time when I was meeting with some of your cook stove women, and they were telling me about the benefits of the clean cook stoves, and we know what it does to reduce black carbon in the atmosphere. And I was so overtaken by the enthusiasm of one of the women that I said, you're so enthusiastic, you could be selling these. And they all burst out laughing because they were entrepreneurs and they had very successful livelihoods by transitioning to the clean cook stoves and being able to get people throughout the villages to do the same thing and clean up the environment in the process. So those are wonderful examples. I know that you do a lot in the area of public-private partnerships. Can you talk a little bit about how you work with the private sector?
Oh, sure, definitely. So Gillian was also referring to partnering with Tata Power in India. And Seva is partnering with Tata Power and the Smart Power in India in one of the states of Uttar Pradesh, where we are building women energy entrepreneurs so that, you know, women bring efficient energy appliances into the households. And that's how you create demand for clean energy through the mini grids, the micro grids, and then how do you aggregate it and take it for carbon trading? So this not only brings access to renewable and clean energy, but it reduces migration of the households, leads to financial inclusion, energy inclusion, education for children. The second example of private sector partnership, and our experience again has shown that, you know, poor and women do not want charity. All they want is, you know, an affordable access to financial services. So we are partnering with some of the companies again like Tata Power, Minda Power, and you know, Adani Power, Reliance Power, and linking up the women entrepreneurs and their enterprises with the financial institutions and building their green skills so that these women are then able to, these are all young women in the age group of 18 to 30 years. And so they become energy technicians working in these solar parks and the microgrids, doing these sales and after sales services for these companies. So these are some of the ways, how do you bring newer employment opportunities, decent and dignified work for the youth of our country. And the third and the important is that how do you bring access to newer tools which work on clean energy? So solar-based cold storages, solar-based dryers for fruits and vegetables. And that's how, you know, how do you work on-farm processing so that, you know, you build resilience of the farmers as well. And you do energy farming along with agriculture. And that's how you build climate resilience of the women and the households.
Thank you so much.
A lot of time, but there's
No,
so
that was,
much.
it was very helpful, and we'll keep you, of course, for the Q&A as well. But first, we want to go from India to Lagos, Nigeria, where we're going to hear from Olusimbo Sojinrin, who is the director of the Solar Sister Nigeria, an innovative organization that supports local women to create energy businesses. So another perspective coming from the grassroots level. She has worked previously as director at the Women's Consortium of Nigeria and as manager at the British Council, leading multiple youth climate change projects, and as manager of the UNDP Bank of Industry Access to Renewable Energy Project. She has trained policymakers and led advocacy for a renewable energy policy at Nigeria's federal and state levels, and serves as an advisor to the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria. So Olusimbo, you come greatly experienced in this space. Let me ask you from the outset to explain to our audience that might not know what Solar Sisters' approach is to advancing renewable energy policies in Nigeria, where you are, and what's been particularly impactful, and how has it been impactful?
Okay, thank you so much, Ambassador Malene, and I'm so grateful to be here and to be invited. Just to say, even though we're crossing over to Africa, our stories are not too different from our sisters in Asia and Southeast Asia. But to share specifically Solar Sisters' approach, we're an organization that provides economic opportunity, training, technology, and support to distribute a range of clean energy products in underserved communities. We do this by helping women launch clean energy businesses and of course, thereby making an income. And our activities are last mile driven, very similar to say we're very last mile driven because we believe that women are a key part of the solution to the clean energy challenge. And women are needed to achieve sustainable solutions to climate change and also a host of other development issues. So far in our existence, which is about 11 years since we came into the space, we've built a network of over 6,000 entrepreneurs across Nigeria, Tanzania, and Uganda. And in total, it has helped us reach over 3 million beneficiaries with clean energy products. In terms of successful projects, one I'm particularly proud of is a project that we're currently just about to finish, which is called the Business Booster Program, which we launched with support from our longtime partners in Nigeria. And the aim of this was to deepen our impact. So we have this dual mission of expanding the network, so that's adding more women, but also deepening the impact for the women who are already in the network. And we found that part of what was successful, the components of this project was we were able to have an advanced training curriculum. So usually Solar Sister runs a 12-month core curriculum, which ranges from business skills to customer service, product knowledge, like just the things that they need to run a successful business. But we've now included an advanced curriculum, which had things like digital literacy, as well as an advanced financial plan as well. Part of this project also included the product credit, so them able to access, which was touching on the access to finance challenge, which was a big one. Business registration, as we know, a lot of these businesses are informal, and so bringing them, registering them opens them up to new opportunities, as well as marketing support. And we found this to be successful because you know, even though it ran during COVID, which was really challenging, and we had like the lockdowns and all of that, but we found that about half of the participants were able to double their revenue over the years. With about 200, there were 660 in total, about 227 of them were actually able to double their income year on year, and we found some got up to 4 times that growth. So we also got some unintended impacts. So we found that during the challenging times in COVID, these entrepreneurs were able to be resilient. They were able to even transcend the hard times. They were able to leverage on technology for the first time in a way where they haven't used before, and really counterbalance the effects of COVID. So this is one that we're really particularly proud of.
That's terrific. Do you work in terms of partnering with local and national stakeholders across government and the private sector? Tell us a little bit about that, if that's the case. And what are some of the challenges you confront? What more needs to be done?
Oh, yes, we definitely work with private and public sector partners. And we're also working to see how we can enhance policy. So for us, one of the most pressing things that we're working on is ensuring that we can amplify the voices of our women entrepreneurs so that their efforts and their challenges can get to the ears of the policymakers that need to make this change. So last year, we hosted a national roundtable in Nigeria and Tanzania to enable policy and market environments to support women entrepreneurs. And at this roundtable, we heard the stories from our women directly, heard the challenges that they have faced, and heard their aspirations. You will see very clearly that these challenges disproportionately affect women. A lot of them were around policy inadequacies, financial constraints, cultural barriers, market barriers, as well as data limitations, right? So for us, the market and financial barriers is just the constraints that the women experience when they're entering or operating or even trying to sustain their businesses. And what we found is society expects the woman to play small. And I don't know if it's related to the fact that it's a male-dominated sector, but the perception is that women are comfortably viewed as either just end users or just at best, maybe just owners of small like retail businesses. But hearing directly from my entrepreneurs, one of the women said, my dream is not to have a small clean energy business. My plan is to expand my business, but access to finance is a challenge. And that brings me to access to finance, because this was raised as one of the biggest challenges that the women face. And even though the society sees or expects women to play small, when it comes to access to finance, the terms and conditions for women to access finance is even more stringent. You will find that there are cases where women entrepreneurs were asked to bring salary statements, bank evidence of structured earnings, a lot of which were not characteristic with the businesses in which they were running. And even just reading recently that about 2% of the global allocation for venture capitalists is going to women-owned businesses. So we can see that as women-owned businesses, access to finance is one of the big issues. But we really believe that it doesn't allow women to grow at the same rate as men. So it makes that disproportionate. So yeah, for us, achieving gender equality would require gender responsive action by both public and private sector to influence policy and market environments, especially for women entrepreneurs working at the last mile.
Well, thank you for that, and for underscoring how tough it is for women entrepreneurs across the board, but certainly in this sector, to get the access to credit that they need, and really to move them from the margins or from small, as you put it, to the medium and larger size businesses that they could be. Because when we shortchange the women, we're really shortchanging all of society. And the prospects for a better world, and in this case, to truly address climate change. We're now going to turn to our audience and to get their questions, and I hope you will participate in them. They'll either be directed to you individually or as a group, but as you're interested in responding, just raise your hand and Allie will be coordinating the questions. So Allie, to you.
Sure. The first question is on technology. Building off Olusimbo's comment on leveraging tech during COVID, can others comment on the role of digital technology in addressing energy poverty and women's access to climate smart solutions? What tools are available for developing nations to, quote, leapfrog using new technologies to still ensure equitable development while also adopting clean energy alternatives?
Who would like to begin? Okay, Rima.
Thank you. It's a great question. And I think digital technology as well as clean technology both played a very significant role during the pandemic. And in countries like ours, especially in South Asia, when the pandemic struck, I think it was the peak harvesting season for small farmers, vegetable growers, fruit orchards. And I think we were immediately able to, since we had our agribusiness initiative and our green enterprises, we were able to procure those fruits and vegetables, which are highly perishable, put them in solar cold storages, which were very decentralized and local, built out of containers. And then through digital technology, so creating local WhatsApp groups and bringing them on digital platforms, we were then able to use electric scooters, which again had solar cold storages, mounted on them, and then we did door-to-door deliveries, and that has now turned into our whole digital enterprise for fruits and vegetables, now connecting over 1,400 small farmers with around 14,000 customers in the cities.
Gillian.
Sure, just building on what we just heard, I wanted to sort of highlight fintech or financially related technologies. So there's just so many ways in which climate fintech can make a difference. Obviously, digital payments, banking, lending, investing, trading, risk analysis, insurance. I mean, insurance is a great example, not so much on the clean energy side, but there's new mechanisms, algorithms for insurance where women smallholders are insured, their agriculture is insured, and using data like the partnership that we have with NASA, these insurance companies are able to get predictive information about what's happening with agriculture so that they can figure out when people who are suffering from drought, for example, are entitled to payments, and those payments can then be automated and delivered at much lower cost. So just wanted to flag fintech as an emerging and really important area.
That's so true. Does anybody else want to weigh in on this question? Okay. Allie, we'll move back to you.
Sure. So this is a two-part question asking how national governments can better support women's participation in the renewable energy economy, and specifically, how can we work with them to overcome legal and institutional barriers that prevent women from full engagement in the economy? We have one panelist asking from Iran. Do you have any concrete decisions, plans, regulations, or advice to help women in countries where they do not have equal rights to work in the environmental sectors? For example, in Iran, women are forbidden from 70 different fields.
Okay. Who would like to start? Gillian, is your hand up from the previous?
I'm happy to comment. It's just, quite daunting when you hear about women being excluded from 70 fields. It's just a reminder how far we are from equality and equity. But this is part of the reason that USAID is placing such an emphasis on systems change. And we really are looking side by side with our partners on a country by country basis to understand which laws are precluding full and equitable participation. Land tenure is a perfect example of an area where women are so often excluded, which has drastic, not just financial consequences for them, but also really negative consequences for environmental stewardship, because if you don't have formal or informal tenure, you don't have the same incentives or the same rights to protect and preserve your land. So, while I'm not able to offer concrete response to the very dire situation women are facing in Iran, I can say that USAID is really dedicated to working on a country by country basis to address those kinds of impediments.
Well, and these discriminatory practices really take a toll. I know the World Bank puts out their annual report on how these kinds of regulations hold the prospering of enterprise back. And also going to the first part of the question, are any of you able to talk about national policies in your own experiences that have been helpful in this regard? Let's turn to you, Olusegun.
Okay, thank you. And I also echo just the sheer pain of the inequalities that we're experiencing around the world as women. So for us, even from a grassroots women perspective, I think what we can do, concrete things we can do, is to continue to advocate, share our voices, amplify our voices to the ears that need to hear. So an example of a policy, so Nigeria has a policy for mainstreaming gender in the energy sector, which was developed by, I think, ECOWAS, and we signed up to it. And we're in the process of developing an action plan. I know I was involved in that process to develop an action plan, but I mean, there are two things: getting this in paper, which is a victory, but then implementation, which I think is usually key. We found that there's a lot of gaps between what's written or documented as a policy document and what you find on the field or in the communities that we work in. But I would say to continue to advocate, to get involved in the process, to move things along. If you've been in the news, you hear Nigeria just rejected some gender-specific bills. We had about 7 bills in the House of Assembly, and they were all rejected. All the gender bills were rejected. And so, and of course, that is a direct it's a direct consequence of the fact of the representation. Even there, we have a very small percentage of women in these positions. And so when these bills come, we're just sheer outnumbered. And so it's to continue to advocate, and based on the advocacy and the shouting out, we've had 3 of those decisions at least revisited. So I think we just need to continue to do that, to advocate, to amplify our voices and make sure that people understand these inequalities.
Good, thank you. Dr. Nawal?
I think another important point that we need to keep in mind and we need to be very aware of is sometimes we have this kind of what they call it, this pipeline leakage, the transformation between education to actual employment when it comes to women in specific sectors. We see that to be a little bit challenging even in the UAE. And as you know, the UAE has been pioneering in efforts to ensure that women are empowered and represented in every sector. Some of those are by choice. Unfortunately, we see a lot of women engineers kind of choose to change career either at the beginning of their career or mid-careers for different reasons. And I think those are very, very important things that we need to monitor. So not only at the entry level, but actually as they progress in their careers. We are seeing also a lot of, and again, from our own observations, the UAE, we've seen a lot of efforts are being put by companies to ensure that women are finding those roles attractive to them. So we're looking at very simple tools like providing maybe nurseries in some of those organizations, or giving flexible working hours, and that has been very, very helpful. But I believe I don't. And from my own observations, from my own travels, from the conferences and the events I have been attending, I think it's a global issue. I don't think it's specific to country. Some countries are putting through political reform to ensure that this is being addressed. Others are not. But when it comes to how many women are being represented on key sectors, and if we look at the sustainability and renewable energy sector, we see that as a big challenge. So and there are so many reasons that needs to be addressed, and I'm sure we've heard a lot about them. But I just want to flag that this is not specific to a specific country or a specific region. There is a global issue, and that we see it globally around the world.
Okay, Ali?
Sure. We have one here on the specific challenges that women in conflict-affected and fragile states face in the energy transition. What must interventions take into account in these settings? And can you speak to any connections between conflict and natural resource extraction and broader environmental destruction?
And before we go to that answer, I want to thank Gillian, who I know has to go on to do yet another panel. So thank you for being with us, Gillian. And we're going to look forward to that ambitious program that you gave us a snapshot preview of.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Now to the question of actions in crisis-affected areas, conflict-affected areas. Anyone?
Attempt.
Sure.
based on some work that we did in a humanitarian setting. So we have, as you know, in Nigeria, we have issues of insurgency in the northern areas of the country, displacements, and even camps, internally displacements in country. And so one of our interventions, especially for resettlement. So when they're coming out of the camps, and usually when they go into the camps, they've lost all of their livelihoods, or they usually just go with the clothes on their backs. And so to reintegrate into the society or into the communities, we found that engaging in clean energy business is one of the ways that especially the women can begin to earn an income and reintegrate. So for us, we did one particular project just targeting internally displaced women, 200 in Northeast Nigeria. And we found that to be very successful. So that project, we integrated village savings and loans as part of that project. So I allowed them to also save in a structured way, gave them the ability to access loans within the cooperatives that they had formed, and then also to save, like, for the first time since moving out of the camps. And we really found success there. So some direct interventions that help empower. By empower, I mean giving the women the tools that they need in order to come out of that situation. So I feel like the interventions need to be intentional, understanding what they've been through and knowing that, and giving them what they need in order to be reintegrated.
Yeah, that's very good, Olusembo. And I wonder, in terms of those savings programs, were they able to transition any of the utility of those resources into small green energy technology businesses?
Yes. So all the women, the 200 women whose intervention are independent micro entrepreneurs themselves, but through the groups, they're able to do a productive use project by themselves. So we had a group joint own phone charging business where they're able to charge phones of all the locals and earn money for the group. They have their social funds and, you know, different ways of growing their group income, but that was just an additional way. And they're still all doing their micro businesses where they're selling solar lamps and solar home systems and clean cook stoves in their communities, because energy poverty is really one of the biggest challenges that we are facing. And so being able to respond to that, I think, has really been helpful for them.
Very good. Thank you for that. And I think we only have time for one more question. So Allie?
Sure. So this builds off what a couple of you have touched on, asking what models work for advancing women's meaningful inclusion at the highest policy and decision-making levels. What opportunities are there to facilitate meaningful dialogues between local and global climate efforts? And what specific recommendations do you have for ensuring women and girls are centered across all negotiations and interventions?
So have any of you benefited from, certainly our two grassroots representatives, have you benefited from any particular national policies that have enabled the women at the grassroots level to more engage in the green technologies? Or what would make a difference?
Yeah, I think it's two ways, that sometimes you also advocate and have pro-women policies, which facilitate inclusion of women in getting access to greener tools and technology. So when I was sharing the example of the women in the deserts using solar pumps for salt mining, we, our national government, we advocated and formed a policy so that women could avail pumps at a concessional rate. And the second was the policy that, they asked the financial institutions to finance these kind of green technologies. And currently we are also having, in fact, today and tomorrow, we are having a roundtable discussion with our Ministry of New and Renewable Energy to design policies and programs specifically addressed to women and girls, so that it just not only gives them access to green technology, but it also leads to meaningful employment opportunities for young girls, and so that they feel that, this is more decent and dignified work as well. And how do you create green skilling of these younger girls or adolescent girls and women as well? So these are some of the areas, and something that we are also working on is on energy farming. How do you have a policy on energy farming, and how that leads to building climate resilience, and also how it leads to India's commitment to net zero carbon emissions as well. So with your farming, you also have half of your land with solar panels, and the energy that's generated, how do you feed into the grid? And so whether, due to climate shocks, your crops may have, variations, but you continue having a minimum income through farming of energy or energy production and selling it to the grid. So how do you have policies that are women-friendly policies? Because land is not always in the name of women. So thank you.
No, that's very good. And, sometimes it comes down to implementation. Often it comes down to that, because as Flora laid out, many policies from the UNFCCC that would really provide the kind of financing and focus on women and renewables if they were implemented, but they're not. So I think advocating to get the political decision-making to work better so that these policies can in fact have impact at the local level. Well, I want to thank everybody who, excuse me, who participated today. Dr. Nawal, Gillian, Fleur, Rima, Olasambo. You have really helped illuminate these discussions on why, if we're going to address climate change with the urgency that is upon us, we really need to do more to accelerate the transition to renewable energy, inclusive renewable energy, where women can fully participate in moving us strongly in that direction. There's clearly much work that needs to be done. You've talked about everything from financing to implementing policies. So thank you for being with us. Thank you for putting a spotlight on these issues. And I think the best course for all of us is to go forward and do everything we can to accelerate the work we're doing. So thanks to each and every one of you.
Thank you. Thank you so